Today I'm brewing a bitter. First stage of our brew is the mash, where we have our liquor or brewing water, which has been treated with any treatment salts that are required, and then brought to our previously calculated strike heat before we can add the grains, which are stirred in gradually so we don't get any dry pockets of grains. Once all the malts and other grains are added, the consistency of the mash will be a rather thick porridge. The bulk of the grains that we'll be using here in the mash are malted barley. You may remember from biology that inside the grains of barley, energy is stored as starch. What we want is sugar for brewing. What normally happens to the grain in the next growing season is enzymes within the grain convert the starch into sugar. So what we do is we restart that process in the malt house and then halt it before bagging up the grain and sending it to the breweries. Here in the brewery, in this mash, in the moist conditions and warmth, this process is restarted and the enzymes in the grain convert the starch into sugars, which we can then later ferment into alcohol. So that enzymic action is now going on for 90 minutes. Keep the temperature nice and stable by insulating as much as we can. Now that all the starch has been converted into sugars, we want to extract that from the grain, so we start the lautering process, which is essentially where we open the tap at the bottom of our mash tun. But what we're going to also do is rinse the grains from the top with more water so we can extract as much of the sugars as possible. This process is called sparging. So here I've got a header tank which I'm going to fill with hot water that's slightly hotter than the mash. The design of the header tank is very similar to our mash tun, just without the perforated insert, and the ball valve at the bottom I've fitted with a botched together sprinkler. Now that the header tank is full, we can start sparging by opening up the ball valve, letting the water flow into our sprinkler. We can now start drawing off the wort at the bottom of the mash tun. The first couple of jugfuls of which will be quite cloudy, so all we do is return these to the top of the mash and it'll filter through the grain to make it clearer. Once the wort is running nice and clear, we can run it straight into a boiler. Heating up such a large volume of wort can take time in the boiler, so it's a good idea to have the boiler switched on at this point as the wort is filling it up. Whilst we're thinking about saving time, please don't forget to fit the hop filter in the back of the boiler tap before you start running the wort into it. Unfortunately, I've forgotten to do this on a couple of previous occasions, which is very time consuming because it means you then have to empty the boiler, fit the hop filter and then fill it back up again. Either that or risk burning your hands to fit the hop filter. It's probably best not to have the wort splashing from a height into your boiler. For a start, it's a sticky liquid which is going to create a great deal of mess, but also there is a risk of aeration, what we call hot side aeration, which some people believe is detrimental to your brew. Once we've collected all our wort and brought it to the boil, we're ready to add our hops. The hops I'm using here are Goldings and Fuggles, two very traditional British varieties. Boiling the hops in the wort is an important step. Hops contain compounds called alpha acids. During the 90-minute boil, these alpha acids undergo an isomerization reaction to form isoalpha acids. These are bitter compounds that will flavour and preserve our beer. To help rapid cooling of the wort after the boil, we use immersion chillers, which will be placed in the boiling liquid 15 minutes before the end just to sanitize them. For more hop aroma than bitterness, we add some late hops to the boil here. Another important process occurs during the boil. This is called the hot break, where proteins that would make the beer cloudy denature in the heat of the boil. a process that can be helped with the addition of copper finings like protofloc or Irish moss. Immersion chillers work in a simple yet effective way. The cold water running through them cools the wort down rapidly. 5 gallons of boiling wort can be cooled down to pitching temperature in around half an hour. The water running out of the immersion chillers, particularly at first, will be very hot, so this can be used to wash up brewing equipment. Once the hopped wort is nice and cool and at pitching temperature, it can be run off into your fermentation bin. This time, running it off from a bit of a height will help aerate the wort as it runs into the brew bin. This aeration of the wort will help the yeast and should result in a successful brew. My method of pitching the yeast is hardly subtle. All I've done with this brew, which I must say I do with most of my brews, is simply open the sachet of dry yeast and emptied it into the fermenter at this stage whilst the wort is pouring and aerating. After the brew had fermented out, I transferred it into a Cornelius keg, didn't prime it, I just ramped up the gas to carbonate it by force carbonating. The beer's been conditioning in the keg for a good few weeks now, possibly even a month. It's been very busy here. So now, time for the test. It's under quite a lot of pressure, so I'm having to pour it quite slowly here, which is very difficult because I'm itching to have a taste of this beer, but I suppose the best things come to those who wait. Well, it's looking good so far. Nice head on there, nice deep colour, crystal clear as well. I've not actually used any fining agents, it's just cleared naturally. Everything's fallen bright, and it's looking great. This is not a beer to serve chilled. This is being served at cellar temperature, around about 15 degrees C. With that slightly higher temperature, you do taste all the malt flavours, because I've got the crystal malt in there, but I've also got that Carafa Special 3, and I really want to taste that subtle note that it gives. Oh, it's nearly poured now, can't wait to taste. Oh, that's good. It's a lovely deep amber colour. Not only from the crystal malt, which obviously gives the lovely rich flavour, but also from that very small amount of the Carafa Special 3, which is a highly roasted malt, but it's been dehusked, so you get a much more mellow flavour. And in the very small quantity which I put in the brew, it's just a lovely subtle back note. I really thoroughly recommend you try it. Get some Carafa Special 3, or even maybe just experiment with a dark malt, but use it in a very small quantity in your brew, just so it's ever so subtle. Lovely.